Good morning. It's Wednesday, July 23rd. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 656 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. A crazy headline this morning that I need to briefly acknowledge. Apparently, an Israeli woman in her 70s today stands accused of plotting to kill the Prime Minister of Israel. The plot never got too far, and I don't think the woman really has it in her, but it looks like there will be an indictment soon. Everything is currently under a gag order. Wacky stuff. Glad it never went much farther than it did. Meantime, lots of confusion yesterday among those Palestinian factions in Gaza waging war against Israel and holding Israelis hostage. Apparently, neither the Hamasniks in charge of hostage talks nor the Islamic jihadis holding Ram Baslavsky hostage can be found right now. That's not good news when it comes to reaching an interim agreement, nor is it good news when it comes to releasing hostages as part of that agreement. And it certainly makes you wonder why our negotiators here in the U.S. have been chasing their tails to get a deal done when there seems to be nobody to talk to on the other end of the line in Gaza. Someone needs to explain. Our guest today is Representative Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat from the great state of New Jersey. I caught up with the congressman last week for a recorded conversation about America's strikes on Iran's nuclear assets and broader U.S. policy toward Tehran, the so-called bipartisan Bunker Buster Act, the importance of a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, and much, much more. Stay tuned because that conversation is coming your way right after I take us on a little detour. Israeli finance minister Bezalel Smotrich made controversial headlines yesterday when he endorsed a security annexation of northern Gaza. Smotrich, claiming that IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir favors the idea, added that Gaza would become an, quote, inseparable part of the state of Israel, end quote. Okay, first, let's acknowledge Gaza cannot and will not be an independent Palestinian political entity anytime soon. Been there, done that, 1 star, would not recommend. But does that mean Israel should annex? Here's where I beg to differ. What happened to putting Gaza on a different path? First defeat Hamas, then identify future leaders, then build back better with perhaps some Arab financiers, then eventually make Gaza less of a hellhole. That's better than holding on to the territory in perpetuity, because if Israel annexes, there will be zero investment. I mean, no Israeli will want to put a shekel of tax money into that place, and that means more misery, more terrorism, and no horizon. I get that Smotrich is playing to his base, and I get that Israel is loath to relinquish control for fear of yet another Hamas resurgence. But let's be real. An asymmetric urban war is heating up. Israel continues to lose soldiers, 451 since the ground offensive began in October 23. It's not sustainable in the long term. So neither is the vision of Bezalel Smotrich. I understand the Israelis are tired, but they're going to have to be more creative than this if they want a better future on their southern border. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned a petroleum smuggling and sanctions evasion network that generates cash for the Houthis in Yemen. Let's break it down. Treasury designated 2 individuals and 5 entities. The first individual is one of Yemen's foremost petroleum importers. He manages a network of companies in Yemen and the UAE, an American ally. Treasury sanctioned 3 of those companies yesterday. Combined, the 3 companies have coordinated the delivery of approximately $12 million worth of Iranian petroleum products to Yemen. The second individual sanctioned is a money launderer, and the other 2 sanctioned entities are a stationary wholesaler and a cement factory. The so-called stationary wholesaler purchased approximately 6 million euros worth of coal between November and December of last year. And if that doesn't make sense to you, well, that's because it makes no sense. Stationary companies don't need millions of dollars worth of coal. The cement company is more straightforward. It's controlled by the Houthis, and it provides cement to fortify Houthi weapons and ammunitions bunkers in Yemen's mountainous north. Good to see Treasury getting after Houthi cash. More, please, guys. Keep up the good work. Headline 2, a round of nuclear talks is scheduled to take place on Friday between Iran, Britain, France, and Germany, the E3, as it's known. These are the first talks since the 12-day war earlier this summer. The European Union's foreign policy chief will be there alongside officials from the E3, who were a key part of that last nuclear deal back in 2015, that deeply flawed nuclear deal. And man, did they fail to deliver the goods back then. The good news now is that the E3 has threatened to trigger snapback sanctions if the Iranians don't agree to a satisfactory deal by the end of August. The clock is ticking. Where is the United States in all of this? Earlier this week, a spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry said that Tehran has no plans to hold talks with Washington. We're also hearing that the regime has no intention of ending its nuclear program. So that means there's nothing to talk about. President Trump has warned that if the regime gets back into the nuclear game, there will be more American airstrikes. High drama here, if you ask me. We'll wait and see what happens on Friday in Istanbul. Headline 3, the U.S. pulled out of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. You probably know this organization as UNESCO. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce simply said that being involved in UNESCO is not in the national interest in the United States. The organization's decision to admit Palestine as a member state more than a decade ago was already a move that triggered a break with the United States. And yes, in case you're wondering, I've got a serious case of whiplash because back in 2011, President Obama withheld funding from UNESCO after it first admitted Palestine as a member state. This all stemmed from a Clinton-era law stating that the U.S. would not fund UN agencies that recognized non-state actors. Well, 6 years later, in 2017, Trump withdrew from the organization altogether for exactly those reasons. But then President Biden reversed that decision in 2023. And now Trump reversed his reversal. So now we're back to square one. The U.S. will remain a part of UNESCO until December 31st, 2026, unless someone reverses that decision again. Good grief. God, can we just stick to what our decisions are and not move? All right. I'm done griping and I'm done talking. So now it's time to press play on my conversation with Congressman Josh Gottheimer of the great state of New Jersey. He's got a lot to say, and just about all of it is worth heeding. Welcome to the program, Congressman Josh Gottheimer.
Good to see you. How's everything?
Everything's great. We're all living the dream here. Thanks for joining us today. All right. I want to start with just a little something that happened a few weeks ago, those U.S. strikes on Iran. You backed this. You thought it was important. Why do you think, first of all, the U.S. was justified in doing this? Second of all, you crossed the aisle, so to speak, to support Donald Trump. And I guess maybe the other question is, what more do we need to do? Maximum pressure, sanctions-wise, or anything else for that matter? What is the way forward on Iran?
Well, I look at it as supporting our country and making sure that America and our allies are secure. You cannot allow, in my opinion, a nuclear Iran. That is a serious line in the sand that we should never allow to be crossed. And so I of course, supported any effort to ensure that Iran was not able to enrich to the point of developing a nuclear weapon. And listen, this has been my position for many years, since before I ran for Congress. When I ran for Congress, I thought the original Iran deal was a huge mistake for many reasons, including, by the way, the fact that we've done nothing, and any discussions have done nothing to stand up to Iran's terror program, which, so you've got two concurrent challenges of what makes the government of Iran our enemy, right? The support for a massive, I would say they're the parent company of terror in the region, right? Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, all enemies of our country, of democracy, of freedom, who've made it very clear that that's their objective, right? To undermine our country, undermine our democracy, and of course, attack our allies, including Israel. Right. So you look at this writ large, you cannot, once you cross the Rubicon and going and having allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon, it completely changes the global landscape.
It does. I noticed that you didn't mention ballistic missiles. That's also another problem that the regime, right? We've got to address that as well.
That was not intentional. right? You want to make sure you shut down their ballistic missile threats. Where we, and they were not afraid to say this, and obviously they tried in their response, although, as President Trump said, it was, they sent us a notification before they launched. But the bottom line is allowing them to threaten our bases and our service members, as they have attacked us through their proxies, right? Attack our ships, our service members, our bases. We know who Iran, this government of Iran, is, right? Like we know they are. They've never told the truth, right? Year in and year out, they lied about enrichment. They lied about their objectives of enrichment. I think the only way they respond, this government there, is through strength. And the bottom line is, if we had a shot in this moment, where with a weakened Iran to minimize and delay their nuclear program, that's exactly what we should have done. And it's why I strongly supported it.
Yeah. And we appreciate you for it. Let's talk about the bunker buster bill. What is it? Why is it needed? Prospects of legislation in Congress.
So the bunker buster legislation allows the President of the United States, under certain circumstances, to transfer the bunker busters, which were, as you know, used in this attack on Iran. Allows them to do that, including allows the president to transfer the planes necessary to deliver the bunker busters, which is a key. The key challenge is not only having the bombs, but being able to move them. And this would allow the President of the United States to transfer that to Israel. And I think, if anything, this will, if Iran decides to enrich again and to move forward with their program and not work something out, this is going to have to, be a constant looming threat against Iran. And to know that whether it's Israel or the United States has the ability to do that, I'm hoping will prevent Iran, or to strongly discourage them from moving forward with enrichment and crossing the line.
Yeah,
once they break out, right, you've got a huge challenge.
Yeah, sure do. Definitely appreciate this initiative. I want to ask you also just about nuclear talks with Iran, right? We know that the administration is talking about going back to, I guess it's Muscat, and to work with the Omanis to try to get the Iranians to agree. What do you see happening here? I mean, at the end of the day, are we ultimately talking about wielding snapback sanctions at the UN? I mean, what's our leverage right now as we try to get the Iranians to agree to never develop those nuclear weapons again? We know they were on the precipice of actually breaking out, and that's why Israel and the United States joined forces to attack. But where are we now with this, and what do you see coming out of those talks?
Well, you saw the Europeans, as you just pointed out, which I think is a big deal, put a timetable on talks and an outcome with the Iranians, and that they would get on board on snapbacks, which as I said a minute ago, and I think you agree with this, the only way they're going to respond is if we strengthen sanctions, put more pressure on them, put more pressure on their government. Obviously, the people in Iran are living in a world where we've seen over the years they're putting more pressure on the government. People who aren't happy with the way of life there because of the actions of their government. And so I think the UN is this is one time where I'm not a big fan of the UN. This is one area where we can use the UN and use the global community to put a lot of pressure. Sanctions pressure, economic pressure, military pressure, and really tighten the screws on Iran. I think I believe, have made mistakes in the past on whether it's our sanctions or others. When you loosen those sanctions, right, you have to keep the pressure on Iran, whether it's their oil program, whether it's their economic sanctions. You have to be tough on them, and that's the only way they respond. We've seen that, right? Which is why in the military engagement, like that I believe had a real deep impact. Yes, of course, there was an attack of their military leadership, the right attack, I believe, their military leadership, their weapon systems across the country, not just other key strategic targets, economic targets. Those are all great ways to set Iran back. And look at where we are now versus where we were months ago, both in Lebanon with Hezbollah, right, where we are with Hamas, where we are in Syria, which although volatile this morning, where we are in Iran. It's incredible. If you had told any of us just a couple months ago, this is where we would be, we'd say no chance, right? I mean, I don't think you'd agree with that, but look at how the landscape has changed, and it's through strength, right? And that I believe deeply in.
I fully agree. Although I have to ask you, and this is something that I continue to ask guests on this program.
Yeah.
Can the Islamic Republic still be the Islamic Republic of Iran if it capitulates to the United States? I mean, it's sort of in the regime's DNA to never agree to a ceasefire with the United States, to never agree to the end of its nuclear program, to continue to call for death to America, death to Israel. I mean, can we expect, in your view, any real change? I fully agree that you need to use as much leverage as possible, as much American strength and as much Israeli strength. But at the end of the day, are we going to get to yes with them, or are we going to continue to muddle through? I mean, those are the questions that I have.
I mean, listen, they're stuck because, to your point, either way they lose, right? Unless the question is, listen, they'll make an agreement where you ease economic sanctions, where the people are happier because, suddenly they have more access to the world. And maybe it actually, there's some who've argued, I've read, who said, well, that might be an outcome where they at home get some relief, the leadership there, because the people are able to live their lives a little more. And right now they haven't been able to because of the actions of their government, right? And because of that attitude that you're talking about, with their absolute refusal to make any agreements to ease up at all on their nuclear program. And their terror program. But to your point, their terror, who came to their back? Who got their back after nobody, right? So if you're in Iran and you're looking at your government who's spent all your money pouring into the Houthis, who call for, as you pointed out, death to America, death to the Jews, right? And you look at this and say, wait, we've spent all this money to lift up all of these terrorist organizations, and then we get attacked and no one's to be found anywhere. Right, we've spent all these dollars and not had any for our way of life and to improve their way of life, and this has just gone on for nothing. So maybe there's a different counter approach here, which says life will get better for them if they follow this approach, and the citizens will be happier, and maybe the government can survive that way. But I'll tell you this: if they pick the other option, their lives will continue to be miserable in the country. I believe you've got a president now who's made it clear that he's unafraid to tighten those screws, to use military action when necessary. And obviously the relationship with Israel strengthened greatly in the last month. These are all developments I think Iran did not see coming. And let's see what happens with the Saudis and others, and all important players that could even really tighten the vice on Iran.
Yeah. I can't wait to see how this thing plays out. I want to ask you about something that I know you worked on, killer drones amendment, right? I know you were working to pass an amendment on the House floor recently, strengthening U.S.-Israel defense cooperation to protect Israel from killer drones. What's going on here, and what's the status, and why is all this support needed from the United States to Israel?
Your point, it would significantly increase the investment in U.S.-Israel counter-drone funding, which I think is critically important because we've seen a huge surge of these drone attacks coming out of Iran and others in the region. And so this is essential for, again, this is a defense program, just like Iron Dome or Arrow 3 or other missile defense programs. And this week we've seen on the House floor the rule failed. The Republicans killed a procedural motion to move this forward. So it's still up in the air. Well, what happens overall with this package? I think in the end, these resources will get in there. This will pass, and we'll allocate more resources to stop these killer drones.
Sounds important to me. I don't know whether that dovetails with the Iron Beam or whether it's other technology, but all the above sounds like something that Israel's going to need.
Clearly, they need it, right? I mean, we've seen how effective it's been.
Yeah, and there were 1,000 drones that the regime fired at Iran over the course of those 12 days. That's a lot of drones. So obviously, tech is needed to help neutralize this threat. Congressman, last question before I let you go.
Yeah.
Keeping Israel as a nonpartisan issue. I know this is hugely important to you. Why is it important to this country?
Because as we've talked about before, and I always say that Israel's national security is critical to America's national security, to our fight against terror in the region. Right, Israel is the democracy in the region, and our greatest ally and friend in a sea of in a very dangerous neighborhood, and in a sea historically of a lot of folks who don't love us, don't believe in democracy, don't believe in freedom, and if we don't fight, if we don't have our friends to help us fight back against those who want to undermine our values and our democracy and our freedom, then that puts us at risk, right? It's all about America's national security. So if you believe in America's national security, which is the oath we take as members of Congress, then you have to believe in a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. And it's as simple as that. The one thing I can't stand is when people play political games and partisan games with Israel. And listen, this is not, you see this on both sides. And I have no patience for that. This is about protecting America and putting our country first. And that's why I'm a huge supporter and a strong supporter of the relationship.
Well, we appreciate you for it. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you, Congressman Josh Gottheimer from the great state of New Jersey, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. It's great to see. Thank you. And by the way, thank you to FDD for your work. It is just incredible and so important. And those who believe in FDD just know that nearly every single day we're working closely together to stand up to fight back against those who want to undermine our freedom and democracy. So thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Love that endorsement there at the end of FDD's work, and love that guy, Josh Gottheimer from the great state of New Jersey. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD's Max Meislish writes in the Wall Street Journal that while the Trump administration isolates South Africa over corruption and the country's cozy ties with American adversaries like Russia and China, markets are largely ignoring South Africa's authoritarian slide. Max underscores that nostalgia for the Mandela era is a powerful force at play here, but that nostalgia is misplaced. If the ANC doesn't change course, tougher U.S. sanctions and trade restrictions will come, risking economic collapse. That would probably also prompt deeper Chinese influence. I don't like where any of this is heading. But by the way, if you want some fun, check out Max's X feed, his Twitter feed. The South African ambassador went after him for his article the other day. Pass the popcorn, man. That guy's angry, and I was just sort of chuckling as I read. Anyway, my colleague Hussein Abdul Hussein published a piece in the English language Lebanese outlet called This is Beirut, exposing Hezbollah's campaign to destabilize Lebanon from within. U.S. policy is to help Israel and the LAF target Hezbollah's weapons, but the deeper threat is Hezbollah's ideology and parallel state structure that undermines Lebanon's sovereignty each and every day. Hussein stresses that Hezbollah must be dismantled, not merely disarmed, and he calls on the U.S. to recognize that its arsenal is only a symptom of this deeper problem. I tend to agree. Finally, check out the latest episode of FDD's Foreign Policy, where host Cliff May, our founder and president, is joined by FDD's Brandy Shufutinsky. She leads our program on education and national security. They're also joined by Asra Normani and Sam Westrop to expose how anti-Americanism, Islamism, and anti-Semitism have taken over American universities. How did we get here? Just follow the money. It'll lead straight to autocratic states like Qatar. Have a listen. And speaking of listening, did you hear that? That's the sound of another episode in the books. Until we meet again, I encourage you to check out the expert analysis on our website, fdd.org. Please do read our quick takes on X at FDD, or watch the videos we post on Instagram and YouTube. And as always, you can make that tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. By the way, if you're not sick of me yet today, we've got an event coming up at noon with Sebastian Gorka, who is Donald Trump's right hand on counterterrorism. I'll be talking to him live at the FDD headquarters. It will also be streamed live. You can watch it on X. You can watch it on all the other places that you would normally watch our events. So tune in for that. And also tune in Friday for another episode of the FDD Morning Brief. Until then, as always, I'm Jonathan Schanzer signing off for FDD.